You cling to a thing, a person, or a place that no longer fits into your life, and it is this that insidiously drains your strength. The tighter you grip, the less space you have for your next step. But by the end of the video, it will be clear where the line is between loyalty and being stuck. Sometimes the hardest part is not losing, but admitting that something has already fulfilled its role. It seems to you that if you let go, you will erase an important piece of your story, although in reality, you will simply stop dragging it to a place where it no longer belongs. And this is where the internal conflict begins, which is familiar to many. The mind understands that it is time to move on, while the heart still begs to stay a little longer. The problem is that we often confuse strength with holding on. We call it loyalty, habit, gratitude. But sometimes, behind all this lies the fear of emptiness. The fear that without this person, this stage, or this version of yourself, life will become poorer. But life does not become poorer when you make space. It becomes more honest. In these minutes, you will see why letting go does not diminish the value of what has been. You will understand how to distinguish maturity from defeat, and why some things have not an eternal but a temporary truth. And when this becomes clear, there emerges not a rupture inside, but a strange calm. You are no longer fleeing from loss. You stop arguing with closure. Nowadays, many live as if they must manage to hold on to everything at once. Otherwise, life will allegedly drift away. But the more noise, notifications, old attachments, and unresolved thoughts there are around, the more not only attention, but also the ability to understand what truly belongs to you becomes exhausted. Therefore, the topic of letting go is particularly important today. It concerns not only relationships or things, but also that internal chaos that accumulates when a person stays too long in a place where their growth has already ended. This video is not about coldness or rejecting feelings. It is about maturity, which allows one to see the difference between what was valuable and what still holds you only by inertia. Here, you will explore why this scenario feels painfully familiar, how it insidiously drains you, and what changes when you stop perceiving completion as defeat. Then we will gently move to practice, where it will become clear how to recognize when it's time to let go and how to do so without internal turmoil. In the end, everything will come together into a simpler picture, where there will be not emptiness, but a space for the next stage. There is one important thesis that is often overlooked. It is not love that truly prevents letting go, but attachment to one's own former version, the one that once needed exactly this. That's why it is often so difficult for a person to move on, even when they have already understood everything intellectually. They cling not only to the object, but also to the image of themselves alongside it. And as long as this is not recognized, any farewell feels like a loss of support. In reality, it is just a moment when the old support ceases to be the only one, and you gradually learn to stand differently. The most painful part of letting go is that the mind tries to label it as betrayal. It seems to him that if you no longer hold on, you have devalued everything that has been lived. But this is not true. Most often, you are not devaluing, but stopping to demand from the thing or person what they can no longer give. And this is where an internal fracture is born, because the old still seems warm, while the new has yet to take shape. People often confuse love with the right to eternal retention. Because of this, they drag along relationships, roles, places, habits, even when the body is already signaling tension in the shoulders, dryness in the mouth, heaviness in the chest. They think that if the feeling is strong, it should last without changes. But life is arranged differently. There are things that were right only at one stage of the journey. They did not fail, did not spoil, did not become false. They simply fulfilled their task, and from there, their presence begins to constrict rather than support. One of the most common traps here looks almost noble. A person tells himself that he is patient, loyal, grateful, so he must stay. In reality, this is often not loyalty but fear of recognizing an end. The fear is especially noticeable in those moments when nothing has brought joy for a long time, yet the hand itself reaches to check an old message, open a familiar folder, revisit the same conversation in the mind. It is like a door that should have been closed long ago, but the palm still rests on the handle, because there was once important meaning behind it. A new turn begins when you stop measuring value solely by duration. Long does not always mean alive, and short does not always mean empty. Sometimes, several months with a person change you more than years of inertia. Sometimes, one place, one project, one old version of yourself provided exactly the push you needed and then became a break. This is maturity, to see that completion does not erase the trace. It simply stops demanding continuation. Imagine a person who has long outgrown a job, but still clings to it because there were first successes, first money, first status. Every day he goes there with a feeling of heaviness in the back of his head and emptiness in his stomach, and then tells himself that he is just tired. In reality, he is not tired. He is stuck in a chapter that has already been completed. Or another case, someone does not let go of a relationship because he is afraid to admit that love does not have to be a place where you constantly feel pain and constriction. He calls it depth, although inside, there has long been not closeness but compression. There is also another mistake that is rarely talked about. Sometimes a person stays not because he is well off, but because he does not trust the next stage. It seems to him that without the old, there will be no support at all. But this belief is precisely what keeps him in place. When attention constantly returns backwards, the body lives as if waiting for a blow. Shoulders raised, gaze intense, breath short. This is how the psyche protects the familiar, even if the familiar no longer nurtures. And then letting go becomes not an act of loss, but a way to regain volume in life. To let go means to recognize that not everything valuable should stay close forever. This does not make you cold. It shows that you no longer confuse memory with obligation, or gratitude with eternal retention. And at the moment when this becomes clear, inside for the first time there appears not emptiness, but a free space for the next experience that won't need to be pushed out with elbows. Close your eyes for 1 minute and choose one thing you currently do not want to give up, even though it is already pulling you back. Do not analyze it for too long. Just hold the image in your mind and honestly note what exactly you are afraid of losing along with it. In these 60 seconds, you will not solve the entire problem, but for the first time, you will see that it is not the thing that holds you, but the promise you once made to it. This is why a small step works better than a big plan. A big plan often turns into a new form of control, while a small action immediately brings you back to reality where there is already a choice. Try not to persuade yourself to be stronger today, but to make one specific shift. Leave only one reminder on your phone that is related to a completed stage, and remove everything else from sight. When your hand reaches to open an old conversation, an old folder, or to replay the same scenario in your mind, you will notice that the tension arises not in the thought, but in the body. It will feel tight in your chest, your jaw will clench slightly, and your breathing will shorten. At that moment, there is no need to argue with yourself. It is enough to make one new choice that confirms not attachment, but movement. How to integrate this into chaos works subtly and very grounded. For example, you are standing in a crowded train, there is noise around, someone brushes against your shoulder, and inside, the familiar desire to return to an old conversation or old resentment rises. In 50 seconds, you can simply plant your feet on the floor, gently lower your shoulders, and let your tongue drop away from the roof of your mouth. On the outside, it looks like a regular pause, but inside, there is more air, your palms warm up, and the back of your neck stops feeling hard. Thus, letting go ceases to be a beautiful idea and becomes a bodily fact that can be repeated even amidst noise. Another working moment is not to wait until it becomes completely easy. Letting go almost never comes as complete relief. At first, it looks like a brief shift inside when you stop nourishing what has already ended. And if you choose a small action rather than a heroic break, the brain resists less. It does not sense a threat because you are not destroying the value of the past. You are simply stopping to give it your entire current day. On a regular evening, this can look very simple. You do not go into places where you will lose an hour again, but choose one task that brings you back to life here and now. This is how the skill of letting go begins without an internal breakdown. Letting go does not erase love. It simply stops confusing memory with obligation. What was important remains important, even if it no longer occupies the center of your life. And when you stop clinging to what is complete, you do not find emptiness within you, but rather a space where you can hear yourself again without the noise of the past. The hardest part of this topic is that maturity rarely looks dramatic. It often manifests quietly, when you no longer prove to yourself that you must stay where your growth has already ended. At this moment, the internal struggle for the old support disappears, and it becomes clear that the next stage does not require destroying everything that came before. It only requires honestly acknowledging that not everything valuable has to be eternal. Tomorrow morning, this may seem quite simple. You will wake up and not drag into the day what has long been asking to exit. Not because it has become easy, but because you have finally stopped calling holding on loyalty. And in that lies a quiet strength that cannot be replaced by habit, fear, or beautiful words. If this video was helpful to you, subscribe.